Hey guys, Ryan Dement from Chasing Financial Freedom Podcast. I hope you guys are having a great day. This week on the podcast, we have Brenden. And guys, you know that I do not like to butcher last names, so we'll let him pronounce it once we bring him in. Brenden is a communications coach and YouTuber. His YouTube channel is MasterTalk, but he has this great quote that we're going to talk about, and I'll read it now. I believe the next Elon Musk is a 7-year-old girl who can't afford a communication coach. So it's my duty to help her succeed in my free resources. Brenden, welcome to the show.
Ryan, it's a pleasure to be on. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into your journey.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So my name's Brenden Kumarasamy. You summed it up pretty well. I'm a communication coach. I started a YouTube channel called MasterTalk. And how that got started was when I was in university. I went to business school, Ryan. And I did these things called case competitions. Think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. So while the guys my age were playing basketball or rugby or football or some other thing that the guys were playing at the time, I'm not one of those guys. I did presentations competitively, and that's how I learned how to speak. But then as I got older, I started coaching the students in that program because we didn't really have a coach, and I wasn't one either. And I was just helping them out. But then I had the idea for MasterTalk because I realized that everything I was teaching them wasn't available online for free. So I started making videos, and here we are today.
And how long have you been doing it?
I've been coaching for 7 years, and the YouTube channel I started 3 years ago.
Nice. So in all this and everything, once you guys say university, we say college. I mean, it all the same thing. The biggest takeaway that you can really look at from what started you from what you were doing in university to today was?
I would say the biggest difference was back then, and I think you mean it from a general perspective, not just communication,
yes.
Right?
Yeah,
I would say the biggest difference is when I was in university, I used to believe that money is more important than time. And today I believe time is way more important than money.
That is awesome.
And the reason for that, Ryan, is because, I grew up in a really poor family. I wasn't the poorest guy on earth. I wasn't born in like India or something. But I wasn't super wealthy. My parents were both minimum wage workers. They both worked in factories, and we barely had money for groceries. So for me, a lot of my mindset in my tens, let's use my tens, between the ages of, let's say, 12 and 22, was getting a 6-figure corporate job. Because I knew if I made $100,000 a year doing anything, I didn't care what it was, my financial security was going to be good for me and my family. So my job was to get a job as an accountant. So I worked at one of the big 4 accounting firms. But when I started making money, I realized that, wait a second here, you don't really need a lot of money to be okay if you're smart with it. You need like 60, 70 grand in Montreal. That's a lot of money. So groceries weren't as expensive as my mother used to tell me. So I realized my mindset needed to change, and time ended up being more important. And I quit that job I worked so hard to get to be an entrepreneur. It's just fascinating.
So what got you there to quit? And let's back up. I wanted one more question. So growing up poor, or in, I hate saying poor, but that's just what comes out of my mouth. Sorry.
It's the right word. Yeah.
What would you describe your mindset? I mean, because we struggle with it today, especially I know inflation is everywhere. You guys are struggling within Canada. We're struggling here in the States. I mean, a lot of people are living paycheck to paycheck, which is poor. What was your mindset like? And how did you work through that process to understand that time was more valuable than money?
Absolutely, brother. Even today, I'm still working through it, by the way, with my coaches and the people around me. But obviously, it was a lot worse back then. And the big theme that I would tell you, Ryan, is scarcity. Right? I had a big scarcity mindset around money, like most of us do, which is, am I going to have enough? Do I really have enough? And this is coming from somebody now who has zero debt. Yeah, a multiple 5-figure net worth, soon to be 6. Like, this is not, I'm not poor. But back then, the mindset was, oh my God, am I really going to eat? What if they fire me at work? And there's a lot of these stories around money that just weren't true. So how did I fight that? How did I overcome that? I would say the first step that really helped my money mindset a lot, that I got from one of my money mindset coaches, Belinda, she says, every morning when you get up, look at what you have. Be grateful for what you have. So what she does every morning, she opens up all of her bank accounts all of her holdings, and she just adds up all the numbers together. And as long as that number is increasing slowly over time, not by millions of dollars, but tens of dollars, hundreds of dollars, it creates that confidence that, hey, I'm doing something right with my life. The other piece is gratitude, understanding that there's a lot that we have. Even if you're homeless, I know it's hard to say, right? Going back to what you said, even if you're homeless living in America or Canada or any first world country, you're still amongst the richest people in the world, and that perspective is so important. Go ahead.
No. It just you're hitting on all the cylinders already, and we're going, and I love it. It's a mindset, and it's a shift in mindset. I mean, every morning I wake up and I'm thankful for the things that I have, and I like that you're looking at your bank. She's looking at her bank account and so forth. But you brought up being homeless. How can somebody? I mean, and I know this is extreme, and I like extreme right now, so we're going there. How do you take yourself as homeless and shift that mindset and say, okay, I'm going to move from where I'm at today on the streets to where I'm going to find shelter and start that process?
Yeah, that's a tough one, man. Tough one. Here's what I would say. I would respond with another story. And the story is simply this. I don't know if you've ever heard of the alcoholic father with two different sons. I'll tell that story because I think it's really powerful. So let's say there's a dad, right, who is an alcoholic, abused all the drugs, made all the mistakes in the world. And he has two sons. And what's interesting about both sons is they both take on very two different paths of life. One of the son looks at their father and becomes an alcoholic, becomes a drug addict, makes all the mistakes in the book. And then the second son ends up becoming a mega successful person. You know, has a lot good money, has a great family, is a leader in his community. And they interview both people 20 years later, Ryan, and in two separate rooms, and they ask them this question: what made you successful? And what was interesting, Ryan, is they both answered the same thing. They both said, well, with a father like that, what else would you expect? And then you might wonder, why did they answer the same thing? Well, one of the sons, the person who ended up being broken in some way, said, well, my father was an alcoholic. My father was this. My father was that. So I just ended up becoming him because it was all his fault and there's nothing I could do about it. Yeah. Whereas the other son, and by the way, I had a similar upbringing, minus the drugs. My dad never took drugs, but he definitely was an alcoholic. Whereas the other perspective was, how do I learn from him? What can I learn from this experience? How about I do the exact opposite of what this person did? And that's exactly what I did and what that person did in the story. So what's the answer to the question? I don't think there's a great answer to it, Ryan. I think the only answer that matters is that life is all about how we perceive life to be. Life is never as what it is, but rather how we choose to look at the world. So if we believe that Ryan has good intentions, if Ryan's a great guy and he has this great sign, good things come to those who hustle, I love that, you're going to perceive Ryan in a great way. But if you go into it with a negative mindset and you think Ryan's a bad person, oh, he just has that sign because he's trying to look good in front of other people, and that's obviously it's not the case. That's not how I perceive you at all. But let's say that's the story. There's nothing that's going to change that story. So just realize that moving forward would be my advice.
But it all boils down to mindset. I mean, the way I describe it is the inner you has to match the outer you. And in our real estate business, we work in the affordable housing space, and a lot of people, unfortunately, are poor and don't understand banking, don't understand credit, just have not been given the tools to succeed. And when they come to us, they're broke. I mean, and when I say broke, I'm not talking about money broke. I'm talking mentally broke. Is they think that they don't deserve any of this, and you have to be not just a coach, but also a therapist. And I struggled with that. I mean, I've been doing this almost 8 years now, and I struggled with it for the first 5 years, just for the simple fact of understanding that mindset and not wanting to shift it and just living in that, I call it the comfortable space. And the way I look at it is, what's going to be harder to change? Your comfortable life or your new world? And I pose that every single time, and you'd be amazed the answer. What do you think the answer is?
I love that. The comfortable life versus the new world. That's a fascinating kind of comparison. I see it in the sense of, for all of us, that new world evolves over time. So I'll give you an example with me to be super concrete here so it's helpful for people. When I was 19, $50,000 a year to me was a fortune. A fortune, like an absolute fortune. Because remember, my parents both made minimum wage and they didn't spend the money correctly. Whereas we could have been just fine, but they made a lot of bad bets, a lot of bad career moves. So for me, if I just made 50 grand a year, which is what Price pays you, Price Waterhouse Coopers, when you start as an entry level kind of employee there. So I knew if I made 50 grand a year, it was a fortune. But so that became my golden token. That became my pedestal. That became the ideal. And I focused all of my attention from the ages of 19 to 20. I hustled my face off, meeting all of the partners for coffee, to get a $50,000 job, bro. Like, I put in all the work. But then when I got it, that's when my mind started opening up to new opportunities. And I'll tell you this on record, Ryan. If I never got that job, I never would have started MasterTalk. Because if you had told me entrepreneurship was a way out, I would have told you to go F yourself. Like, that doesn't make any sense in my mind. I'd have been like, you make no sense. Like, why would I be an entrepreneur? There's so much risk. I'd rather just be like, so I had a very like limited mindset. But what happens is momentum, if you choose to, momentum unlocks bigger pieces of the mindset over time. So then when I got the 50K job, I was like, okay, well, if I become a partner at this firm, I'll make 300. And then when I got to that point, I said, okay, but what else is possible? And then I start to dream. So my advice for people who are getting started, don't focus on the being the millionaire thing. Most people aren't. Most people barely make the top 1%. I don't know if people know this. Top 1% of people in the US make 450 grand a year. Like, it's not like they're not making $1 million a year. So start with, how do I get 10 grand in my bank account? How do I get 1 grand in my bank account? And work up to the momentum. And then when you start to win a little bit, then that creates momentum that snowballs over time.
So then let's go there. Let's start that. We're going to put $1,000 in our bank account. How do we do it?
Right. So how do we do this? Okay. So here's what I think. I have a different perspective than most people, so hopefully that adds value. It's this idea of ikigai, right? Ikigai is a Japanese term that talks about how do you live your ideal life. So one of the sides of the triangle is what you love to do. Another side of the triangle is what the world needs from you and is willing to pay you. And the third part of it is what are you actually good at? And the trifecta of ikigai is how you live your ideal life. And there's another guy, I forgot what his name is, but he calls it the zone of genius versus the zone of excellence. So the zone of genius is what you're called to do, that you love to do, that you would do it every second of your life, that you get paid to do it, that people need as well. But I actually argue against that. I don't think you should ever start with ikigai, or you should start with finding the trifecta. I think where the journey begins is your zone of excellence, because it's easier to optimize for. In other words, in layman's terms, I encourage you to start with what you're good at and what makes money. I know a lot of people don't like to say that. A lot of billionaires come on TV shows and podcasts and they go, hey, you should like follow your heart. You should follow your passion. I think passions are a crock, brother. And the reasons I think they're a crock is because a lot of passions are not monetizable. You're passionate about anything. You're passionate about your dog, your cat Steve, your hair. It doesn't work. Whereas for me, what's helped me a lot is really doing an honest audit of what am I actually good at and what am I not good at. So when I was 12 years old, to make this concrete, while everyone else was dreaming of being an astronaut or stand-up comedians, all this shit, I looked at my life and I said, okay, let me look at my report card. I was a math genius. I wouldn't study at all. I would get 90s in math all the time. Every other subject I was shit at. So I went on the internet. I looked up all the careers that paid well for mathematics majors, and I landed on accountant, and I never changed my mind. And then when I started making money, going back to your question on $1,000, when I started making money, then I had a lot more time to think, because I wasn't worried about the bills anymore. And then I started singing Kumbaya, and then I started going into my vision later in life, and I ended up finding my ikigai. But my advice for those who are looking to make 1,000 or even 10,000 is start with what are you actually good at? And the way you figure that out is by comparing yourself to other people. Comparison, I believe, is a tool if you know how to use it correctly. Mm-hmm. It's not. A lot of people say comparison is the thief of joy. I disagree. And then when you compare that, then you're able to make a list of things that you see yourself doing that you're willing to tolerate, and then make bank, and then make the decisions of life later.
I agree with a lot of that, and then there's some disagreement just from my history. Because my whole thing is, I'm an 8-year overnight success because I've had 2 failed other businesses, and those businesses were things I was very good at. One was a collection agency. When I learned, I know how to collect bills. I can make people pay their bills. I was very good at it. It drove me, but it also brought greed out So that also was a demise of that. And then I also had a debt buying company to where we bought debt and then worked through that whole process. Very good at that too. But it also failed because of the same thing. Until I found something I was very good at and I had passion and it mixed the two together, then it actually worked. And that's where the real estate, the affordable housing, we buy defaulted mortgages, all those things I'm good at, but I'm also passionate about. And I think it's a hybrid of what you're talking about, is because I'm good at the financial aspect, but I have passion in helping people and getting to the right place. And during this journey, I've also learned you can't go down that rabbit hole with people when they're fighting their own demons when it comes to finances, because it's a personal journey. You can give them the tools, you can help them. And all I can say is, we'll be here when you're ready. And that's what we do. And it's a little twist on what you talked about, but it also has a lot of what you also discussed too.
100%. And it's nice that you said that, Ryan, because it helps us draw a nuance that I feel a lot of podcasters don't go deep into. Here's my take on this, is your zone of excellence often leads to your zone of genius. But I do think, and I still believe this, unless you're a small percentage of the population, because I'm empathetic to that. It's easy for me to come on a podcast and say, yeah, find your passion, all that stuff. Yeah, it's easy for me. I found it at 21. Like, who else is going to do that, right? So people are going to look at me and say, oh, yeah, well, Brenden did that. I think it's more about the zone of excellence, all of those finance, all of the history you talked about, then leads into your zone of genius. But I think the argument, a couple of things. I would say the first piece is the zone of excellence doesn't necessarily need to be a business. I think that's what a lot of people miss when they try and get wealthy. I know a lot of people who are multimillionaires who were employees their whole life, like easily, because they had high income jobs. So I think there's two pieces to that. I would say the first piece is I would still optimize for a zone of excellence. If you can find the zone of genius life, kudos to you. Then I have no advice for you. Go live your life. That's amazing. I mean, that's brilliant. I didn't personally. I became an accountant, right? Like my journey was literally, I became an accountant. And I realized to get that job at KPMG or at EY or at PwC or Deloitte, a lot of these people did case competitions. And I said, what the hell is a case competition? And then I started competing in these things to get the eyes of the executives. And then I got an unhealthy obsession with them. I started coaching them on communication. And then I accidentally become the world's youngest C-suite communication coach in the world. That's what happened. And then I started MasterTalk. Whereas I think for most of us, the mistake is we try and optimize for a zone of genius that we haven't found yet. And we just sit there in inaction versus going, okay, don't optimize your zone of excellence in a business. Optimize it for a high-paying job that you can tolerate for like 2 years and you can build up a lot of savings and then use that 2 years of suffering. Once again, I like giving real advice. And then use that 2 years of suffering to then be so much in pain that you try and figure out your zone of genius and then live your rest of your life in bliss.
I just did that for almost 25 years. So there you go.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we all have that journey, and it's amazing what we actually put up with to get to where we're at. But then we also, I call it discounting. We discount who we are and what our abilities to accomplish things. And it all starts right up in here. It's all in your mind. It's what's between your ears. And if you don't decide or you don't figure out what you want to do in life, you're always going to continue to be in that same place. And one of the things I tell these individuals that come to us, I was talking to a gentleman last week, and it's just a short story. He has rented a home for almost 30 years, same home, never moved. I mean, literally in 30 years, I think he said the family that owns the house, it's on the second generation or third generation of family that's owned it. I said, so that house is free and clear. You've paid their mortgage off multiple times. Why do you want to stay there? And his response was, because I'm comfortable. And it's like, okay, so what do you do for work? And he tells me he works in a blue collar factory. He's making decent money. I mean, he's probably making $65,000, $70,000 a year after being there. He's probably in his mid to late 50s. And I said, so have you been doing the same job while you worked there? Practically so. And I said, so practically your whole life is the same. Boils down to is he was never given the tools he feels from his family passed down that to succeed, but he never pushed himself mentally like you did to be able to make change. And that's where we're at as a society, is that change is a 4-letter word. We don't want to do the work. Everything on social media is instant gratification, and it's all about, I'm going to become a TikTok overnight success with 1 billion downloads, and I'm not going to ever have to work. And it's gotten bad. I mean, it's bad to the point of it's like I don't even want to look at social media half the time.
I completely agree, man. I definitely think there's a lot of bad actors in the social media space who are kind of spitting knowledge that isn't really relevant for people. But I feel when it comes back down, I love the story that you told around the person who didn't have that tools. I think what's great about this life, and since we're having an extreme conversation, might as well give you my extreme piece of advice here, which is a quote I got from one of my coaches. And he says this so well. He says, are you making an excuse to do the thing or not do the thing? So there's 2 types of people in the world, Ryan. The first type of person is always going to make an excuse not to do something.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, I did this. I'm tired. And the second type of person is always going to make an excuse to do the thing. So, oh my God, I have all these things going on, but I'll still make it happen. And it's that nuance that creates successful people versus unsuccessful people. So really ask yourself, the person who's listening to this show, are you always making an excuse to do the thing or not do the thing? And that's what really pushes us to be successful. And what's great about this era that I love, and that's the era I grew up in, is information is free. Whereas in the past, it took forever to read books. I hate books. I still hate books to this day. It's so hard for me to read through pages. Like, I'm just not smart enough for that. And I just can't retain the information. But podcasting, my God, I ate that stuff ferociously when I was younger. And I just learned everything about finance. And it's not hard. You just save more than you keep. Try and live with other family. I still live with my sister and my mom. That's why we have a massive household income. It's not because we're rich or wealthy. It's because we just pay one rent, right? It's all about bringing your expenses down to the bottom, and then we just invest the rest in index funds. It's super simple. It's just most people aren't willing to do the simple things. It's so simple, in fact, that nobody does it right.
Well, that's the thing. You're willing to do it, and that's where it boils down to is you're willing to, 1, put yourself out there, 2, change, and the third is go after what you want because you've identified what you're looking to do, and you're looking to create that life that 1 makes you makes you happy, and 2, you get to be free as a bird and do what you want. I mean, and people don't realize that you can do anything you want. It's just a matter of how much time and effort you put into it. It's life. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm going to get on a tangent, but I mean, we all fail. I mean, there's not a single day that I don't fail and I have to get back up and dust myself off. And I'm sure the same thing with you. You have to get back up and do something also. But the thing that people don't realize, and I'm going to talk about entrepreneurship, small business ownership, whatever, is they think all of that, all above the top of the iceberg. Have you seen that image where you have the iceberg up top where you have all the happiness and then all below is all the hard work and all the crap that we have to deal with? People really think that's just false. And it's just, we make it up because we don't want people to be entrepreneurs. I want you to be an entrepreneur if that's what you're looking to do, but it is crappy. It's peanut butter and jelly sandwiches early in the at late at night. You're up at night, sleepless. You're trying to find deals to make things work. I mean, there's just so many things that go into it that people don't realize. Corporate America, and then I'll get off my soapbox. Corporate America teaches you to be fat and happy, to be fed every 2 weeks or however you got paid. Entrepreneurship teaches you how to fish, and it teaches you another life skill that you're not going to get as being a W-2 employee. And it's not meant for everyone. And I'm not bashing anybody that doesn't succeed as an entrepreneur. It just is a different mindset that most don't realize. They need to either address it or walk away and say, okay, I'm just going to be a W-2 employee and I'm going to find my side hustle that'll keep things going.
I think that's just beautifully said. I feel when it comes to entrepreneurship, there's this preconceived notion, Ryan, that, we have all these successful people, it's called survivorship bias, like people who are successful that we kind of don't see the other dominoes that fell and the other people who lost the game. That's why I'm always cautious to tell people to jump into entrepreneurship. And if I'm being perfectly honest with you, real to real, if I never had the idea with MasterTalk, I'd still be a W-2 employee to this day. because I didn't find a reason that was compelling enough to start the business. So for me, and my advice is always, because the person who's gonna be an entrepreneur doesn't need my advice. They're going to be an entrepreneur regardless of what I say. It's
Correct.
really the people who are the third type of person. So the first type of person is just going to be an entrepreneur. They sold lemonades their whole life. That's what they do. They wash cars. They do all that crazy stuff. Second type of person, it should just be a corporate employee, but they think they can be an entrepreneur. And then the third type of person can actually do well in both environments. And that's very rare. And I'm actually, I thought it was a category 2. Ended up being a third person. I could actually thrive in both. But I would say the advice is always, if you can't do the business part-time, it's going to be really difficult for you to do it full-time. And I actually did something very different than most entrepreneurs. It doesn't work with every business, but whenever you can make it happen, you do it. So in my case, I side hustled MasterTalk for 2.5 years before I quit my day job. 2.5 years.
I got you beat. 4
Right?
years.
Okay. Oh, 4 years. There you
side hustle.
There you go. I love that, man. So that's why I still live with my mom, even if my business does well now, because I just want that extra 10, 15 G's to lever up and do something else with it. So that's how entrepreneurs think. And that's the first piece. The second piece, I had replaced 50% of my income before I had left corporate. Not 100, but 50%. I already had sales out of the gate. Most people, they jump into things and they still try and find product market fit, which I think is crazy. And the third piece is I had a very clear plan when I exited corporate, and I had a 9-month emergency fund. And and I had really good relationships with my boss at IBM. So if shit hit the fan, I could just get my corporate job again, and it's as if this whole shit never happened. I had everything figured out. The corporate thing, all of this, all the executives at my company knew about MasterTalk, but they just thought it was a fun thing. And they all told me, if this shit hits the fan, we'll give you a job the next day. So I had obviously I never needed it, but I had all my ducks in line to make sure this is successful. Whereas a lot of entrepreneurs are jumping into just randomness because they see it's fun on social and they get slammed in the face.
Yeah, and they don't realize it takes a lot of effort, time, and capital. Side hustle 4 years for me was tough. I was working 80 hours, probably 75 to 80 hours a week in my W-2 job.
Same.
Come home at night and work 7 days a week. On my side hustle. And it's just, for me, it was one, I knew it could be monetized. 2, I enjoyed it and was passionate about it. But the third thing was I was so intrigued because the market segment was so antiquated. And when I say antiquated, there was no technology. Literally spreadsheets were sent out when you're buying defaulted mortgages, or if you were looking to work with a city to develop a block and so forth, you got a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet to look at. So we've come out with a whole technology piece and I got to learn to speak English again, implemented it to the point where it's starting to change the industry. It's very large. It's billions of dollars, but we're making inroads, and it's slowly but surely. But that's just a side piece of what we do. And you made me think about this. If I truly wanted to go back to, my mom asked me this question pretty consistently 8 years later, is would you go back and work for your W-2 employer? And I would say, nope. I'd rather the struggles are good for me. I've learned a lot about myself, and I would learn to find another way to make money. And if that's, I can consult. I mean, there's so many things that I can do. I could work. I would go work at In-N-Out Burger here. They're paying $22 an hour if I had to do that. I love In-N-Out Burger. It's one of my favorite places.
We'll go together. We'll go work there together.
I mean, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to keep my dream alive. And I think that's where you talk about 3. I have a 4th is you have people that actually are very hungry to accomplish what they're trying to do, their goal, whatever it is, monetize it, side hustle, whatever, and they do whatever it takes to get that done. And I think that's a whole different mindset. And most people will never get to that point because of what we see in society today is the instant gratification. And it's sad because a lot of people have the skill set to get there.
Yeah, man, and that's why I always say, and thanks for sharing that. Now I'm hungry. Now I want to go get some In-N-Out Burger. But I think the key is,
I just had it the other day, so that's what came to my mind.
I think that the takeaway from this is, at the end of the day, this is why most people shouldn't be entrepreneurs. for all of those reasons. The first one is the whole idea behind instant gratification. If you're going to entrepreneurship and you're already in debt, you don't know how to manage your money, you're screwed as an entrepreneur because you got to be your own accountant. Even
Yep.
if you might hire one, you still have to look at your books. You have to understand numbers work. That's the first piece. The second one is the ability to think long term. Entrepreneurship really only pays off in like years 9, 7, 8, 9, 10. You have to really care about what you're doing. And then the third one, which is the most important one, and you said it yourself, change is a 4-letter word. And that's why most people can never be entrepreneurs, because for entrepreneurs, change is a necessity. It's a necessary skill set to actually be successful in the game. And most people aren't willing to actually change on a rapid, consistent basis. Like I almost ran out of money last year, and I had to really rethink my sales strategy or else my business was going to die. And I figured it out probably 2 months away. I wasn't like Elon, like a week away from running out of money. It was like 2 months away. Okay, my business is a lot easier than what he's done, but you know what I mean? I think that's the key that a lot of people don't realize. But that's the last piece. I loved every second of it. I just love being in this mode again, and it's super fun.
But it's what you thrive in, because you're correct. Year 5, year 6, year 7. I mean, things start taking off in the first several years of running your business or being an entrepreneur. It's a struggle, man. Peanut butter and jelly, top ramen. I mean, no joke. I mean, I know I did it, and I know other people that did too. Today, can I say we're on solid ground and things are growing? Yes, but I'm always hungry for more, and that's where I think entrepreneurs think differently. And I'm always concerned about our numbers. And one of the things I do on the side, I mean, is I consult, and I have a private practice where I do coaching, and most are doctors, attorneys, and airline pilots making a lot of money, 6 figures, some 7 figures, and you'd be amazed how broke they are. And having those conversations with those individuals is eye-opening, because I get to get into their practices, and you should see what they spend their money on. It is
ridiculous.
And they wonder why they're broke. And they're like, I'm making this money, I shouldn't be broke. And I said, I could probably go, most of the time I can go tell him, what type of car are you driving? And when he's telling me he's driving a Lamborghini or a Porsche or something like that, how much you paying on that lease payment on a monthly basis? Oh, it's $2,000. Oh, okay. All right. I mean, these are just, I call them first world problems. I mean, they really are. I mean, and they're not even trying to keep up with the Joneses. I mean, they've exceeded the Joneses. But and I circle back and I digress. The biggest pieces with the entrepreneurship is the struggle in the first 3 years is what's going to define you. And that defines your life, because when you have a 6-figure hit, which I did, I really screwed up some technology and I had a 6-figure hit. All joking aside. And I still have nightmares about it, but it's coming back and it's being taken care of. But it's been a long journey. And if you're not willing to put that risk in, 1, and 2, to fail and get back up every single time, entrepreneurship is not for you. Small business ownership is not for you. And sometimes I joke about it. Life is that way. And if you can't balance all those out, then I don't know how you can function in life, because life is not all roses every single day. Just me.
Said, man.
Just me. I'm not saying that they shouldn't do life. That's not what I mean, because people think of that. And I said, no, you have to change the way you think about life. And we get back, we go full circle now back to what you talked about, time and money. It's one of the questions I ask my coaching clients on the affordable housing space side, and they think money is the more valuable than time. And I said, guess what? Go look at the average millionaire or entrepreneur. They actually file bankruptcy or get themselves in a large debt amount at least one time in their life. And guess what? They lose it all and they gain it all back because of mindset. But time, you can never get back. Once it's gone, it's gone. So if you live in the past or you're dealing with the past, you're never going to get yourself in the right place.
Completely agreed. And it's that equation, by the way, that made me quit my day job, because they offered me a lot of money to stay. Like I wasn't the kind of student or entrepreneur that was like, oh yeah, I got D's and F. No, I was a straight A student, all-star. Like I would have done just fine in corporate and made 300, 500K a year probably. But
And
the
it never had to worry about anything.
never had to worry about anything. So why did I cut down my earnings by a significant amount? It's because I realized that this youth, this 20s that I'm in right now, I don't get this back. I don't get the youth back. And I pictured myself with $10 million, and I said, you know what? I'd probably give it all up to go back to right now. Because this is where I have a ton of energy, and I can compete in a way that anyone else who wants to be a communication coach in this industry just can't do if I start young enough and I put all my chips on this table. So I said I got nothing to lose, might as well, and I've been having fun ever since.
Okay, we're going to have to ask one more question, and we'll get this all wrapped up. But whether you're in your 20s, 30s, or 40s, you're saying you want to go after it. So what separates you from everyone else? Because unfortunately, most of your peers in their 20s are not wanting that. They're wanting instant gratification, and they want it, unfortunately, handed to them. So what separates you from everyone else?
Absolutely. I think so. There's a couple of ways of tackling that question. It's just me as a human being versus business. But let's tackle a couple of them. I would say what separates me from a mission perspective is I really give a shit about this. Like, I'm really pissed off that other coaches before me who could have easily used YouTube as a medium just didn't democratize the information. Like, it's not hard what I teach, right? It's like, okay, random word exercise, do this, do that. It's like 1, 2, but nobody was doing it. So it's like, okay, but what about the next Elon Musk? Like, when Elon was 15 years old, Ryan, as you know, nobody gave a shit about him. He didn't have his exit, he didn't have his success. It's like, but he needs to be a great communicator to advance the human race. He still became successful. He doesn't need me anymore. But yeah, if he was a great communicator, would his life been easier? Yeah, he would have struggled a little bit less. And so the next Elon, who's 15 years old right now, who's probably some girl in Cambodia, doesn't have money for a coach, I'm the only person they have. If I don't make videos, no one else will. So I think that's really what separates me from a business perspective is I'm willing to lose. I'm willing to lose all the money to make this work. That's why I've done well financially. And that's why I don't spend the money I make. Because I always have that, what if I lose the game? I got to keep the game. Recession's coming. I always got to think about that. So that's one piece. The other piece, though, that I think you'll enjoy, Ryan, which is more important, is I feel the pain of my mentors. What does that mean? Here's what I think interesting about human beings, Ryan, is we see other people make the mistakes and we just want to repeat the mistakes. Let me give you an easy one to help us understand this. Isn't it fascinating how every music band does the same 4 things? They become really successful. Then they get into drugs, alcohol, women, or men, depending on what type of band they're in. Then they separate, and then they do a redemption concert 10 years later. It's always the same cycle.
Yes.
And yet every time it gets repeated over and over again. Whereas what I've done differently, and that's why I guess I'm still immature, but I've matured a lot for my age, is I look at the people I admire, Lewis Howes, Tony Robbins, and the perspective is I feel the pain of their divorce. I go, what if I was divorced and I lost half of my money and I lost custody of the kids? What would that feel like? And I go, okay. And the other piece to that is I assume they're right first before I disagree with them. So if Ryan, like you, tells me something, I assume, this is the difference between me and most people, I assume that what you're saying is with good intention. If Ryan is taking time in his busy life to tell me something, there's probably some truth. I might disagree with some of it, but I'm not going to disagree with all of it. And that quality alone has made me skip all the pitfalls. Never drank in my life, never smoked weed, never made any mistakes. And I've saved a ton of my money. Why? Not because I'm smarter. It's because I just listen to people who are much smarter than me, and I take their advice seriously. That's what's really separated me.
But you're open to change, and you're open to
drastically.
Like you said, listen to other people and see where they've been because they've made the mistakes for you. I'm with you for that. The huge challenge that we have today is people don't realize that failure is part of the journey to success. And if you don't actually fail, you're not going to get to success. They think these unicorn companies that come along, those are a dime a dozen, man. I mean, I shouldn't say dime a dozen. They're very unique and very different. But guess what? Those guys have failed many times before they got to this place in life. And it's like, you think that an overnight success like Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, you don't think they failed along the way? And they were, I mean, come on. I mean, that's just my mindset. That stuff just really pisses me off. And when I hear that, I'm like, I don't even want to spend time with you. At this point, you're just wasting my time.
I love what you said there, Ryan, and we can end on this. This is a great quote that I think will help people. Because more of a switch that people just have on for some reason, other people have off. So I'll summarize what you said in a quote that Jeremy Coward talks about. He's the CEO of Purpose Hotels. He says that the more you execute, the more you fail.
Yep.
The more you fail, the more you don't care. And the more you don't care, the more you execute. That's a fascinating cycle. So the more you execute, the more you fail. The more you fail, the more you don't care. And the more you don't care, the more you execute. So what does that mean in layman's terms? That means that people who are successful don't see failure as an obstacle. They just see it as a muscle or a workout that didn't work the next day, but they still go back to the gym the next day. So what does that mean? That means someone who's successful is going to go through, let's say we use a podcast. Well, 100 people, let's say we send 100 pitches. Okay, we pitch ourselves on 100 podcasts, and 99 of them say no, but one of them says yes. You go, oh. So most people go like, crap, they give up after 10, I'm done. Whereas the successful person just keeps swinging until they hit a home run. So they go, oh, if I send 100 pitches, I get one yes? Okay, wait a second. If I send 10,000 pitches, 100 people will say yes. And that's amazing. Then those 100 people will introduce me to 10 other people. I'll be on 1,000 podcasts. It's amazing. And there's just a different perspective around failure that successful people have that unsuccessful people just don't.
And it's all mindset, and it's all about being driven to get there. People ask, why are you doing podcasts? And I say, there's one reason. I want to be able to share a story that's beneficial to my listeners, that helps them along the path of life. That's it. And everyone's like, why aren't you monetized? You're doing great. All this and that. It isn't my main goal. My main goal is, these are my passion projects. My main focus that I get paid for are from my businesses. Now, if someone comes along and says, hey, I want to monetize you, I'll look at it. But I'm not out there actively pinging the radar and saying, I need to monetize, because I think it loses its value at that point. Because then I'm having somebody come in and say, okay, you need to be this, this, and this. And I'm like, no. Because I've gotten to this point without any monetization, and we're doing quite well. I mean, we bring on guests like you that have this energy and this spirit and the ability to tell a story that our listeners can engage with. I want to be real. And that's what it boils down to, is I want to share real stories.
That's beautiful, man. It's funny when you said I want to monetize, you had a different thought in my mind. I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting.
So it's been a journey, man. It's been a journey. So it's been one of those. So I thank you for coming on, sir. It's been a great conversation. This has been fun. I definitely need to have you come back around, and we can have some more conversation for sure.
Absolutely, Ryan. Thanks so much for having me. It was blessed.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I'll be talking to you.
Of course.